Hey, Thursday, Family Matters, the one and only Kevin Peterson. How are you?
I'm great, Mr. J Staples, the sober caddy, the expert.
Sitting in Florida, you look rested. You ready?
I'm rested. I'm ready. And here's the bad news. It's May 2nd, and the Florida weather is starting to happen. it's warm but now it's humid.
Yeah, it's. I was talking to someone like I love my vest, and my vest season in Texas is probably like 2.5 weeks long, and
Yeah.
I think we're past the vest season now. We're into like carrying extra shirts in the back of my car because I need to change out sometimes. So
Yeah, we're let's see. I'm looking it up so I can tell you. We are 85 degrees and 65% humidity, and that's it's only gonna go up.
God bless Florida and Texas, but it'll be football season in no time, and then then things will be back to normal. But what is going on? Any burning desires? Anything on top of Kevin Peterson's mind before we get into it?
Oh, nothing critical. I mean, I'm sure you're going to bring up all sorts of. I'm sure you're going to push all my buttons. So let's just get started.
Well, we've got a couple of topics. I think one of the most things. I think it was a really good question that we may be able to kind of layers to it. We got a question that says, like, I've heard you guys talk about addiction as a family disease numerous times. What exactly do you mean that addiction is a family disease?
Got it. Couple of different layers there. The first one is that my belief, and the way I've always looked at it, is addiction doesn't just affect the individual. It affects everyone that individual is engaged with, whether it's personal, like, friends, whether it's professional, whether it's the coworkers, et cetera, or family, So everybody gets impacted by their behavior and what's going on, right? That's the first part. And then the second part is when you take a look at addiction and alcoholism and addiction, and then what they look like and how they play through, you find that there are generational patterns in families, and on both sides, right? On the addiction, and then the people that are affected by the addiction. So you find that the family has sort of made these patterns of saying, oh, well, we behave like this. And they just kind of take that for granted, like, well, that's how families behave. And it's like, well, no, that's how families behave to accommodate somebody that's struggling with addiction. So that's kind of the two-sided answer of why we call it a family disease. Well, and then the last part is, in order to actually recover, the entire family system has to recover, not just the individual. Yeah, that's the answer to that question.
So, I mean, the age-old question, this is probably way above our pay scale or anything, but I mean, is there anything within like the family, going back, like, you always hear like, well, there's alcoholism within our family or something like that. Or, I hear cases all the time when, you may have grown up within an alcoholic home, and you have the people that, will stay so far away from drugs and alcohol because they saw it in a mom or dad or within whatever. And so they just want to run away from it, never touch drugs or alcohol. But is there any kind of genes or anything? There's always,
Yeah.
Do they know of anything? Like, does it run within genes or anything?
It is definitely genetic, and again, I'm not a doctor, and I'm certainly not a neuroscientist, so let's just be super clear. But every person I've ever heard talk about it that does have those credentials and that education, neuroscience and neurology and all that stuff, they're like, oh yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. It's definitely, we've always talked about nature nurture, right? And is it in your nature? Is it in your genetic? Is it in your nurture? Is it how you were raised, and therefore you were susceptible to it? So the answers for alcoholism and addiction are yes and yes. And then the last part is we're really starting to see the role that trauma plays in this. Intergenerational trauma plays in, and I want to be really clear. I was just talking to somebody earlier today about this. Trauma doesn't create addiction. If it did, every single person on the planet would be an addict. But it certainly acts as a catalyst. For those of us that have the genetic predisposition and have that, inside of us, when we experience trauma, when we experience behavioral stuff that we struggle with emotionally, for lots of different reasons, and we don't have time to get into all that, our automatic self-soothing mechanism is food, sex, porn, alcohol, drugs, shopping, fill in the blank, right? That's our automatic solution. And then one of two things happens. Either the person that's using that as a self-soothing mechanism can pull away from it and say, ooh, these are bad choices, I need to stop doing this, or they can't. And the ones that can't are the ones that we call alcoholics and addicts.
Interesting. Yeah,
It
truly is a family disease, and it kind of affects. I've seen it from the personal growing. As an addict alcoholic, like the layers. I always thought that I was just affecting my life, but to see on the other side, being in recovery, how I affected loved ones, everyone that I touched. The life that I lived, and especially my family and so forth, and how their lives were affected just by my behaviors and so forth. So we have a question. So they have a 25-year-old son who they went to treatment out of state, out west. He's over 2 years sober. He's working at the treatment center. So it sounds like he's back on his feet, and sounds like he's doing really well. Is probably, working either at the treatment center he got sober at, or within treatment, let's just say. And so here is a mom that is, this is a long email, but so paraphrasing. So the son has really put in, my terms, some healthy boundaries, or some boundaries within the family, and has really cut down on communication, has come in, sees the family maybe one trip back home, doesn't spend a lot of time, has told them that he just wants to kind of get back on his feet, doesn't want to, seems to be like the new husband within this, the mom's writing. They've never seen eye to eye. So really what the mom is writing about is there seems to be some frustration as to she wants to have a relationship with her son. There seems to be some frustration around the boundary with the son, saying that like she sent him to treatment. Like why is the son kind of cutting off contact? And then at the tail end, she wants to maybe see any advice or suggestion as to how she can have a better relationship with her son. So sounds like the son, and she went in, she did say that the treatment center has advised her that they've told the son that it may be in his best interest to kind of push away from the family. So the mom is somewhat blaming the treatment center from kind of getting in the middle. So there is some resentment and frustration. Sounds like there needs to be some healing on both sides. So there's a lot of mouthful in there. I think you can kind of get the grips of what's going on. So she's kind of looking for advice, some from frustration. Maybe you can give her some advice.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. What was that? I'm just kidding. So
I tell you, that was the longest email we have ever gotten.
So the mom is frustrated because the kid went to treatment and he's keeping distance from the family, on the advice of the treatment program. Right. So this kind of goes back to what the questions you were just, now I understand why you asked me these questions ahead of time. You are sneaky, Jay.
Well, this was two different questions, actually. Yeah. It always seems like we get questions in like block themes. I don't know how this happens.
Yeah, in a cluster. So here's the deal. This is a classic example of the family needing to do their own work. And whether that is working with a therapist or with someone like me who's a therapist and a coach, and really digging into the family system and taking a look at the role they played. And one of the most important things I always want to say is you are not responsible for your son's addiction on any level whatsoever. You are responsible for how you respond to it. So if he's telling you, I feel like I need to take a break or I need some distance, the best thing I can tell you to do is, okay, respect his wishes. He's trying to take care of himself. In that process, let's also take a look at you and your family, and let's take a look at your stuff. Let's start digging into some family of origin trauma, some codependency, some family systems. Let's take a look at who you are, where you come from, so that while he's doing his work, you're doing your work. So then there's an opportunity for us to come together and have a really great conversation like, hey, it hurts my feelings that you want to keep your distance from me. Can you help me understand why? And when he says, well, I feel like you're toxic, then you can say, okay, well, what do you mean by that? So I can work on that. And that, I'm giving you sort of the perfect scenario, but that's the answer, is that, he's telling you he needs a break, respect his wishes, and then use that time to work on yourself.
Good.
Yeah. That's really what it comes down to. Now, that's generally not a very popular response, to be honest with you. When the family gets frustrated and says, well, that seems ungrateful, and after all we've done for him, doesn't he understand? I'm like, okay, so thank you for giving me that information.
Yeah.
Let's work on that, and that's where a good family therapist or a good therapist that understands addiction and codependency and family dynamics can zero in on that and say, oh, okay, I totally understand why you would feel that way, but let's talk about that, Yeah.
Yeah. We got we're getting a lot of comments on someone from Instagram, but
I'm not seeing anything
from my Instagram. I think it's
good. Who is it?
And all my broken friends then they wanted my lover to take a relative because it was wealthy and I was in love and
okay.
So we'll get to the third. If there's a question, Sue is, if there's a question on Instagram, I think he or she left, but anyway,
yeah,
I think they were kind of just venting and kind of giving out their kind of situation with trauma and their experience. It doesn't look like there's a kind of question, but they're just talking about their trauma and kind of a broken relationship in their family, kind of talking about kind of the family addiction as a family disease and kind of the family cutting. Anyway,
got it.
So if there is a question, we welcome, please don't hesitate. We will get to the question. We certainly love, even if you have experiences, don't hesitate to put them in. We also have a question. So we have a wife, their husband is in treatment and looks like just got into treatment. First week in treatment, it says. Maybe they're entering their second week, depending on when this email came in. But so the therapist, she had the very first call with the therapist, this first time in treatment. The therapist is talking about that the husband's life is unmanageable and he's powerless over alcohol. His wife was saying, like, he just drinks too much. His life is not unmanageable. He's very successful. He lives a great life. He's a great dad. What does it mean that his life is unmanageable and he's powerless? He just drinks too much?
Well, that's the powerlessness right there. So, when we talk about being powerless over alcohol, we talk about is the inability to control how much we drink and when we drink. So that's that's obviously you're quoting the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm powerless over alcohol and my life's become unmanageable. So when we talk about the powerlessness, we're talking about the inability to control how much we drink, and the inability to control whether we stop or start. So that's the straightforward answer to the first part. And the second part, when we talk about powerlessness, we're talking about, how our life is. How's my relationship with my kids? How's my relationship at work? How's my relationship at home? How's my relationship with my wife? Am I present for people? Am I emotionally present? Am I nurturing? Am I a good human being? And so I would tell you that in 33 years of doing this, I've never seen anyone that cannot control their alcohol and has everything else okay. There's going to be cracks in the armor somewhere. Your husband's in treatment for a reason, and so I think maybe you're going to find some underlying causes there. And just because somebody goes to work every day and makes money and lives in a nice house doesn't mean that they're not an alcoholic. There's kind of this myth that you have to live under the bridge and push a shopping cart and wear a trench coat in order to be an alcoholic, and that's really not true. You can be super successful, you can be super high profile and be an alcoholic. Those things happen. And what happens, there tends to be a circle of people around you. When you're super successful, there's a super circle of people around you that are vested in your success. So what they're going to end up doing is making sure that you're okay. They'll tolerate your drinking and they'll clean up your messes and solve your problems around you because their well-being is based upon your success. And that's where that gets really dangerous, especially for business people and for, people in the theater, actors and musicians and that sort of thing. I got sober in Los Angeles. I saw that a lot in the people that were high profile people, that there was this, group around them that were, their livelihood was based upon this person's success. So they spent a lot of time, creating cover stories, solving problems, hiding things, paying people off. Because if anyone actually dared to say no to this person, they get kicked out and they lose their livelihood. And so a lot of the times it's the same thing in the family system, is that, dad drinks a lot and he's mean or whatever, but it's okay because we live in a nice place and we have a nice car. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, no, that's not okay. But, you can have it all. It's okay for, to say, hey, dad, we love you and we're happy for all the success we have. But, you drink too much and it's pretty miserable. So,
yeah.
And honestly, we're kind of back to taking a look at the family system and saying, okay, sure. So, the person at the treatment center is saying, hey, your husband's an alcoholic. And you're like, well, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, let's take a look at that. So
it's like the only life that they know, like pretty much it'd be willing to bet like their marriage probably, that was just like a normal, I don't know their life, but even when they were dating, that probably like just a normal thing. That's probably the only husband she knows that just became a normal part of their life and dating and life. Do you recommend family members kind of reading the AA Big Book or something, kind of getting a glimpse?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's a lot of things I recommend. Definitely, I like them to read the AA's Big Book because it helps understand. I also like them to watch a movie documentary we've talked about before called Pleasure Unwoven, because I think Dr. Kevin McCauley does an exceptional job of explaining the nature of alcoholism and addiction from a medical side, from a psychological side, and from a spiritual, emotional side. And that tends to really help people who are not alcoholic or not addicts be like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Well, of course not, because you're not one of them, And I think that kind of education, when the families that I work with, that's one of the first things we do is dig into heavy education. Let me educate you. Let me teach you. A lot of your questions are going to get answered in this process where you're like, oh, now I understand, and that tends to be the best way to get things going.
Well, I mean, what you were saying, going back to, doing the family doing their own work. I mean, the last two questions, with, the son putting in healthy boundaries, and then this wife hearing about unmanageability from the treatment center, that, right there, you have two family members or, they could be doing their own work while the other two are in treatment or have done their own work. They can do work. It doesn't mean they both sides, like you always say, need to do work, and you guys can meet in the middle and have a healthier life when you're both sides are doing the work. So it goes right in what you always say.
Yeah, I mean that really is the best. That's the best avenue for success for everybody.
Yeah.
It's not just dad drinks too much, or my husband drinks too much. I guarantee you, there's more layers to that onion that are gonna probably get peeled back now that he's in treatment, and there's gonna be some openings. There's gonna be some like, oh, goddamn, didn't think about that, but that's okay. We'll get there, and we'll get successful across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, I think you did a good job. You can clock out. Anything? So we really kind of hit in kind of the family dynamics and kind of the, as a whole family disease. And it kind of, addiction has these roots, and these roots go deep. It's not just the tree that you see. These roots are deep, and and that's what I've learned just through my own journey through addiction and recovery. As how far these roots, go within my family, my life, my friends, whatever it may be. Just the day-to-day life that I saw as normal life, now in recovery, was like, whoa,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's the absolute truth. Hey, by the way, next week, I'm on vacation next week.
wow.
Yeah, I know.
Do anything fun?
We are flying on Saturday morning. We're flying to New York City. Going to spend the night in Manhattan. And then on Sunday, May 5th, my 33rd AA birthday, we are going to get on the Queen Mary 2 and sail to England.
You got sober on Cinco de Mayo?
In California. Yeah, I know. What a knucklehead, right? I mean, and let me tell you, I didn't go out in a giant ball of flame. I went out with a big whimper with my tail between my legs, just like, oh, this isn't working anymore.
And I'm all for people getting sober. Now, don't take the wrong way, but I have a problem with people that get sober on really big drinking days. Like, I would say to you, like, give it one more day. Like the people that got sober on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve or Cinco de Mayo or St. Patty's. I got a friend that got sober on St. Patty's Day, and I'm just like, dude, give it one more day. You could have gotten sober on March 18th. Like, nothing would have changed. And you could have gotten sober on May 6th, Kevin. Like, you could have had one more day. Like, come on.
Yeah, well, I can always start over,
No, I don't want, we need you, but come, like, hey.
Well, let's be clear. I did not, I started celebrating Cinco de Mayo on the Dos de Mayo. And after about a 3-day run, I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore.
Well, hats off to anyone that gets sober on a major drinking day. Like I would have justified. I'll start Monday kind of guy, but hey, anyone. But so we'll take next week off. Maybe we'll do something. Maybe we'll do like a replay or something. We'll do a best of maybe, and then we'll start it all over again. We'll hopefully keep the questions coming. If you see a replay of this, type in questions. We'll get to it when Kevin gets back, and we'll have all kinds of New York stories and cruise ship stories and
London. I'll be in London for 3 days.
London stories and fish and chips and whatever it is. So enjoy your time away and hide your phone, would you?
I will. Don't you worry.
All righty. I'll see you. I'll see you in 2 weeks.